My name is Michael. Sometimes a grand gesture can't save a relationship that's already dead. And that public humiliation is the universe forcing you to see what you've been refusing to acknowledge for months. I'd been with Francesca for 4 years when I proposed to her at a party surrounded by her friends, and she told me she'd rather stay single than marry me. For years that had started with genuine chemistry and connection, but had slowly deteriorated into something I'd been too hopeful or too blind to recognize as finished. We met when I was 29 and she was 25, both living in Denver. We'd met online, and after a few chats, it was clear we had immediate chemistry. So we started dating within weeks of that first conversation. The early relationship had everything you hope for. Deep conversations that lasted hours. Physical affection that felt natural and constant. We had shared goals about careers and lifestyles and what we wanted from life. That sense of having found someone who fundamentally understood you. We'd moved through the first 2 years with a genuine partnership, supporting each other through work challenges, celebrating successes together, building routines and inside jokes, and all the small intimacies that make a relationship feel solid. Around year 3, subtle problems began to emerge. Nothing catastrophic initially, just friction points that would create arguments we never fully resolved. Disagreements about communication. She'd say I didn't listen. I'd say she didn't express herself clearly. About priorities, she'd want more spontaneity, while I'd want more planning. About emotional needs, she'd say I was too analytical. I'd say she was too reactive. We'd have these arguments, get frustrated, then pause them rather than actually solving anything. We would just move on without resolution, leaving the underlying issues to simmer and build. Over months, these unresolved tensions layered on one another, created this accumulating weight in the relationship that neither of us directly addressed. By year 4, Francesca's behavior had changed noticeably. She became distant in ways I registered but couldn't correctly interpret. She'd visit my apartment less frequently. When she did come over, there was less eye contact, less physical affection, and a colder tone in how she spoke to me. She'd seem mentally elsewhere during conversations, responding to what I said but not really engaging. I noticed all of this while feeling the distance growing, but I misinterpreted what it meant. My assumption was that she was frustrated we weren't moving forward. After 4 years together, she wanted more commitment and was pulling away because I hadn't proposed yet. I thought that marriage would stabilize us. That formal commitment would bridge whatever gap had opened between us. So instead of having difficult conversations about what was actually wrong, I started planning what I thought would fix everything, a proposal. Meanwhile, I was still supporting Francesca financially in significant ways. Her startup had gone through funding issues. She'd taken a pay cut to stay with the company, and I'd been covering more of our shared expenses and helping with her rent occasionally. She'd accepted this help without hesitation. I thought I was being a supportive partner, but I didn't realize I was being used. As months passed into the 4th year, things deteriorated further. Francesca stopped initiating anything. No plans, no affection, no conversations. She'd give short replies to questions. Even when we managed to be together, she would avoid physical intimacy with various excuses. When I visit her, she seems irritated by my presence, even during the limited time we spend together. All of these were warning signs I should have recognized as relationship death rather than relationship problems needing a grand gesture solution. But I was committed to my interpretation and believed that she needed reassurance through commitment, that a proposal would demonstrate my seriousness and reignite what we'd had in the beginning. So I bought a ring, spent significant money on something I thought she'd love, planned meticulously based on what I believed she'd want. Francesca had thought public proposals were romantic, that she'd love the attention and celebration of being proposed to in front of friends. I'd remembered this, thought it was the key to making the proposal perfect. I found out that she'd be at a party one Saturday evening, a birthday celebration for one of our close friends. I decided that would be the perfect moment. Surrounded by her friends in a celebratory atmosphere, public enough to be memorable, but intimate enough to feel personal. I told myself it would be a beautiful surprise. I arrived at the venue around 9 o'clock. My heart was pounding with nervous excitement, my palms were sweating, and the ring box was in my jacket pocket. I walked into the party space, a lovely venue with good lighting, music playing, and people scattered around talking and drinking. I found Francesca across the room, talking with a group of her friends. She looked gorgeous in a short, tight gown she was wearing. I should have noticed that her happiness existed specifically when I wasn't around. But I didn't. I just saw it as confirmation that this proposal would restore that happiness to our relationship. I walked toward her through the crowd. Francesca saw me approaching. Her expression changed immediately from relaxed happiness to something like confusion and annoyance. It was not the delighted surprise I'd imagined. But I was committed now and couldn't back out with everyone watching. I got to where she was standing. Her friends had gone quiet, sensing something was happening. I knelt on one knee right there, pulled out the ring box, and opened it. The entire party's attention shifted. Music quieted. People pulled out phones to record what they assumed would be a beautiful moment. Her friends whispered excitedly to each other. Francesca froze. Just stood there staring at me with this expression I couldn't read. I was caught entirely off guard and cornered in the worst possible way. I delivered the proposal, said something heartfelt about our 4 years together, about how much she meant to me, and about wanting to build a future together. While I was nervous and emotional, I was sincere, believed genuinely that I was saving our relationship, that this moment would be the turning point that brought us back together. I asked her to marry me with the ring extended toward her, waiting for the yes and the embrace I'd imagined. Francesca was visibly irritated that I'd put her in this position. The seconds stretched out painfully. She didn't say anything, just stood there looking at me, kneeling in front of her, while everyone waited for her response. The longer the silence lasted, the more public pressure mounted. People are starting to look uncomfortable, and the romantic moment turned awkward as time passed without her saying yes. After what seemed like eternity, she spoke. She didn't soften her words or try to spare my feelings. She said clearly enough that she would rather stay single than marry me. Some of her friends laughed. I knelt there for a moment, unable to process that she'd actually said what she'd just said, that she'd rejected me publicly, in front of dozens of people, recording on their phones. Emotional dissociation kicked in. Some protective mechanism shut down my feelings so I could function through the immediate crisis. I slowly rose from the kneeling position, closed the ring box, put it back in my pocket with hands that felt disconnected from my body. I maintained a calm expression. I couldn't let everyone see how destroyed I was by what had just happened. I dusted off my pants with deliberate casualness, buying seconds to compose myself before having to walk out of this room. Before I left, I told her, "Congratulations on being single." Her friends went silent immediately. They realized suddenly how cruel they'd looked, laughing at my public rejection. They probably realized that Francesca had just humiliated someone who'd loved her enough to propose. I turned and walked away. I held myself together through pure force of will, focused entirely on not having a public emotional collapse, on saving the breakdown for when I was alone. I made it to my car in the parking lot, then drove home. When I got to my apartment, I finally let the emotions hit. The woman I'd loved and supported for 4 years had rejected me in the most humiliating way possible. I was embarrassed. Dozens of people had witnessed my rejection, recorded it on their phones, would probably share it online or at minimum discuss it endlessly. I was angry at Francesca for handling it so cruelly. I blamed myself for being so blind to what was obviously a dying relationship, at the universe for letting me make such a catastrophic mistake. I couldn't fully process that the proposal I'd imagined as healing and romantic had gone so terribly wrong. I spent that first night replaying everything. The days that followed were brutal. I stayed home from work for several days, using the excuse of being sick. I couldn't focus on anything except processing what had happened. I was trying to understand what had gone wrong, why Francesca had responded so harshly. whether there was something I could have done differently. I started connecting dots I'd been ignoring for months. All the warning signs that the relationship was over. The distance, the coldness, the lack of affection or engagement, the way she only seemed happy when I wasn't around, the excuses for avoiding intimacy, the short responses, and the general sense that she'd checked out emotionally while I'd been desperately trying to hold things together. Francesca had been done with our relationship for months, maybe longer. But she'd stayed because I was supporting her financially and helping with rent. She'd been using me, taking my money and my help while giving nothing back emotionally. She was keeping me around for convenience while emotionally moving on. This realization burned worse than the rejection itself. I'd been a fool. Not just for proposing at the wrong time, but for months before that. For accepting being treated like an ATM instead of a partner. For interpreting her distance as relationship problems instead of recognizing she'd already left emotionally. And the more I thought about her behavior in those final months, the unexplained absences, the phone secrecy, the disengagement, the more convinced I became that she'd likely been cheating. She'd probably been with someone else while I was helping pay her rent and planning proposals. I had probably been laughing about my pathetic devotion with whoever she was actually interested in. I had no proof of infidelity, but the pattern was evident once I stopped being willfully blind. There was nothing I could do about any of it. Couldn't undo the humiliation. Couldn't recover the time, money, and emotional energy I'd wasted. Couldn't confront Francesca about using me, because what would be the point? So I made a decision. Going forward, I'd always put myself first. I would never again sacrifice my self-respect or financial stability for someone who wasn't reciprocating. I would never again ignore obvious warning signs because I wanted to believe in something that wasn't real. I would never again try to fix a dying relationship with grand gestures instead of honest conversations. I blocked Francesca on everything: phone, social media, and email. I cut off every avenue for her to contact me. We were done, and I needed complete separation to heal. I heard weeks later, through mutual friends, that Francesca had indeed been seeing someone else. She had started dating him a couple of months before my proposal, but had been using me for financial support while building a relationship with someone she actually wanted. The information validated my suspicions, but didn't make me feel better. Just confirmed that I'd been played completely. I went to therapy. The therapist helped me see patterns I developed. She helped me understand that I'd been so focused on making the relationship work that I'd ignored that relationships require both people actually wanting to be in them. That Francesca hadn't wanted to be with me for months, but I'd been too invested in my narrative of us to see her reality. That the proposal had been my desperate attempt to force commitment from someone who'd already decided against it. The therapist also helped me work through the public humiliation aspect. The shame of being rejected in front of dozens of people. The knowledge that my worst moment had been recorded and likely shared. She pointed out that while the situation was humiliating, it had also given me undeniable clarity. That the public nature of her rejection, as brutal as it was, had at least been honest, and had saved me from the worst fate of building a marriage on a foundation of resentment and obligation. This perspective helped somewhat. Didn't erase the pain, but reframed it as a harsh gift rather than pure catastrophe. Looking back now, about 2 years since I knelt in front of Francesca at that party, I understand everything more clearly. I learned that grand gestures can't save relationships that are already dead. That a proposal won't fix communication problems or bridge emotional distance, or restore a connection that's gone. I learned that financial support should never be one-sided in a relationship. That if someone is taking your money but not giving emotional reciprocity, you're being used, regardless of what you want to believe about the relationship. I learned that distance, coldness, and disengagement are signs of a relationship ending. Not problems to be solved, but the actual death happening in real time. That trying to fix those symptoms is futile because they're not symptoms. They're the disease itself. I learned that public humiliation, as painful as it is, can be a gift. That Francesca's rejection of me publicly forced me to see what I'd been refusing to acknowledge privately. That, without that brutal clarity, I might have kept trying to save something that was long past saving. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect is non-negotiable. That I can't sacrifice my dignity and my resources for someone who doesn't value me. Putting myself first isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival. Some people might say I should have known better. Should have recognized earlier that the relationship was over. Should never have planned a public proposal without being certain of the answer. They're right. I should have done all those things. But I was blinded by hope. By investing 4 years together. By the belief that love and commitment could overcome problems that were actually beyond overcoming. I paid for that blindness with public humiliation and private heartbreak. But I learned thoroughly and painfully in ways I'll never forget. Francesca is with the guy she was dating during my proposal. I know this from social media posts I've seen through mutual friends. They seem happy in that carefully curated way people present on social platforms. The proposal disaster was the worst moment of my life, the absolute nadir of my romantic history. But it also became the catalyst for necessary change, for learning self-respect, understanding that some relationships need to end and trying to force them to continue only extends the suffering. I'm better off, and I'm finally at peace with all of it. Because the worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the push I needed to demand better for myself. And I've never looked back.